Why did we never hear of Nika before Wano? Why was the name Nika never mentioned till 1,000 chapters into the series? And yet, why is it that so many races seem to have a reverence for the sun, and even the sun god all along? This is the brilliance of how Oda subtly worked in the influence of a single legend across all the most important races and societies in One Piece, while at the same time never tying it all together with the true origin of the legend, Nika, until it was finally time for everything to come together in the final saga. Nika is the uniting piece that connects all the beliefs of all these ancient cultures, but at the same time, what's so fascinating is that it's clear that not every culture knows the same story. For some, like the Buccaneers, the legend of Nika is clear and detailed. They believe in a dancing warrior of liberation that brings freedom. Yet for others, like the Fishmen, the legend itself is nearly lost, leaving behind only a faint echo of the importance of the sun and the freedom it brings. See, in the real world, we often see definitive similarities between certain religions that all seem to have stemmed from the same origin point, that simply diverged over time and morphed into variations of one another. The language and names and details of the stories may change across cultures, but the roots are the same. So too is this reflected in One Piece, as it's clear that at one point Nika was widely worshipped throughout the world. But after the Void Century, the world government clearly tried to scrub all trace of his existence away. And so the story of Nika split across countless races and societies, as over the centuries, some managed to cling on to the original legend, but some cultures managed to only keep the message and teachings, and finally, in other cultures, the story was lost forever. That's why all the hints about Nika across the first 1,000 chapters were in so many bits and pieces for so long, because so few knew of the single original unifying legend, but at the same time, so many held on to their own version of the remnants of what was left behind. The importance of the sun, a sun god, the dawn, Joy Boy, liberation, all these fragments of ideas. So what do we see when we actually draw a line through all the ancient societies of the One Piece world and break down each culture's version and knowledge of Nika, as well as why each society ended up with the version of the story that it did? When we begin to trace it all together, a clear, ominous, overarching trend that shaped the history of each of One Piece's races becomes clear. But before we get into it, I want to shout out Surfshark, the sponsor for this video. Surfshark is a VPN that I use, and I recommend that everyone should use a VPN when you're online. When you're online, you are at risk of having your data being acquired by companies or cyber criminals. But with Surfshark VPN, my data is encrypted. That means that I am essentially completely invisible online, so no one can get my data, no one can track what I'm doing. Even Surfshark itself does not know what I'm doing online. Not to mention, all ads and malware are blocked for me as well. And the best part is, with Surfshark VPN, I can change my location online to anywhere I want on the globe, meaning that I can virtually travel to other countries and get instant access to all the free movies, TV shows, sports, all of that they have available for streaming that isn't available in the United States where I live. Surfshark actually conveniently has a library where you can go to check out all of the shows that you could get free access to from streaming services in other countries by swapping your location to them. So with Surfshark VPN, you get a ridiculous amount of new options for free viewing. And the good news is, right now, you can get up to 3 additional months for free by using my promo code MORGE. At surfshark.deal/Morge, just hit the link in the description below. So that aside, the most interesting aspect of the history of Nika is that you can break it down into levels of knowledge for each culture. There are cultures that know the story in clear detail and worship Nika itself. There are those that know simply of a sun god, those that don't really know about a god but do know about the dawn of the world or the importance of the sun, and finally those that know nothing of the legend at all. And what's fascinatingly realistic about the way that Oda wrote each society's culture is that every culture's level of knowledge of Nika makes perfect sense when you consider two things: the nature of the race and its relationship to the world government. It makes for a remarkably real-world history once you break it down. So for example, to begin with, we have general human society. No human culture that we have met so far seems to believe in Nika. And why is that? Well, the world government spans the entire globe, and most every human island and nation is under the world government influence to some degree. And obviously the world government would have been very successful in stamping out all mention of Nika and his associated religion across all islands under its influence during the Void Century. It simply wouldn't make sense for any human islands to know about the legend of Nika, with one notable exception that we will get to shortly. However, if we look past humans, we have the Fishmen. The Fishmen are the second most prominent race in One Piece after humans, and this is because out of all the other ancient races, Fishmen are the most integrated into human society. While there is obviously significant racism, we still see Fishmen in all sorts of places in human society. For example, Tom was the most famous shipwright of Water 7 as a Fishman. And out of all the ancient races, Fishmen are the only ones that are allowed at the Reverie, and are therefore recognized as a member of the world government. Even just in culture, it seems like there is great overlap between Fishmen and humans. As such, I believe that Fishmen are the starting point of the very realistic trend that can be noticed among One Piece cultures, wherein the closer the race is to the world government, the further away the race is from the legend of Nika. See, despite being an ancient race, the Fishmen don't seem to know about the Sun God. There is no mention of the Sun God or Nika in their culture, and Jinbei has never reacted to Luffy being Nika. The only ones who know some part of a legend at all is stated to be explicitly the royal family line, and even Neptune doesn't seem to know about Nika specifically, but only of an individual who will one day come to fulfill Joy Boy's promise, likely the same individual that they believe will guide Poseidon. So from what it seems like, the specific legend of Nika has been lost among the Fishman people, and that makes a lot of sense considering how integrated the Fishmen have become into general human society. They were likely a victim to cultural erasure many centuries ago, or maybe during the Void Century itself, as no legend of Nika would be allowed to exist under the world government's rule, and the Fishmen have most definitely been put under the world government's rule. However, it's clear that even if the legend of Nika itself was erased, the remnants of its messaging remained with the Fishman people. After all, even though the Fishmen are under the world government and are fairly integrated with humans, they still have their own cultural bubble. And this is why Fishman Island was the first arc that we saw a culture that was so centered around the importance of the sun. This is the imagery that is so prominent throughout the arc, the path to the sun. This is what Otohime dreamed of. This is what Fisher Tiger and the Sun Pirates named themselves after. The sun is meant to represent freedom for the Fishmen. Now, in the Fishman Island arc, there was never any religious or mythical connotation to the sun. The sun simply seemed to represent freedom to them because they were literally denied the light of the sun, forced to live on the bottom of the sea floor, dreaming of the open world above. This is what Shirahoshi gets to finally experience out on the surface, the free, unbound world that the sun shines over. However, this culture's emphasis on the sun still likely originated with the ancient days of the legend of sun god Nika, who himself represented freedom and liberation, and it's likely that over time, even as the legend of Nika itself was stripped away from the Fishmen, what they were still left with in the modern day was their symbolic cultural significance of the sun. I find Oda's depiction of the Fishman culture to be extremely unique and believable in this sense, as it really is a culture caught between two worlds. They are forced to live in the parameters of the human society that rules them, under a government that likely stamped out a lot of their cultural origins, but at the same time, the key values that they still hold as their own independent race never went away. Even if Nika himself was erased from their history, what Nika represents is still what they yearn for. Now, if we move past the Fishmen, we start getting to the truly independent societies, the Minks and the nation of Wano. Remember I mentioned that there is only one human society that is an exception to the world government's influence? That is, of course, the nation of Wano. And tied to this nation is the nation of the Minks, as the two have been connected for centuries. Of course, the Minks also exist independent of the world government, as their island of Zou itself cannot be found or tracked. And so here we see two societies that have a greater understanding of the ancient legends. Neither the Minks nor the citizens of Wano explicitly know about Nika or the sun god. Even after outright seeing Luffy's form, Nekomamushi makes no connection about Nika. However, both societies do know about the dawn of the world. They know that there is a legend that foretells the world one day coming into the dawn, with the sun essentially freeing the world from the dark night that it's been under. Even outside of defeating the world government, characters like Toki and Kinemon both believe in a dawn one day coming to Wano, so the idea of the sun and liberation is present in both societies. The only thing missing is the actual personification of the sun as a sun god, Nika, the specific idea of a warrior of liberation being the one to bring the dawn. And if you're enjoying this video so far, make sure to subscribe for more videos like this every week. And make sure to get your One Piece inspired clothing today in the Morge store. We have hoodies, sweatshirts, and t-shirts. And get your one-of-a-kind puzzle of all major One Piece characters. Link in the description below. And so now we go even a little further and we get to the races that are truly closely tied to the legend. The Giants, the Shandians, the Buccaneers, and very likely the Lunarians. So what do they all have in common? Well, these are all races that are either completely removed from the influence of the world government or have been eliminated by the world government. Let's start with the Giants and the Shandians. We already saw that the Giants of Elbaf made multiple references to the sun and even specifically to a sun god in the Big Mom flashback, and the Shandians referenced a sun god along with various other gods. As we know, Elbaf is essentially untouched by the world government as the nation itself is considered to be the strongest in existence. Even Wano wasn't considered off-limits till Samurai Ryuma relatively recently, 400 years ago. But even more importantly than that, the Giants also have extremely long lifespans, living for literally hundreds of years. This is an absolute game changer, as in terms of generations, the Giants are far less removed from the Void Century than any other race. They are likely able to preserve the same cultural beliefs as they had from 800 years ago within their own little bubble in Elbaf, because it simply hasn't been as long for them, relatively speaking, and the world government likely can't easily erase them. Now, the Shandians obviously don't live as long as the Giants, but they are even more cut off from the rest of the world, having been launched into the sky. And even before they were launched into the sky, the existence of their island was completely hidden, as Noland was the first human to ever find it, and no one even believed him. What's interesting is that by Kalgara's time, the Shandians seemed to believe in many gods, and most importantly, they worshipped the god of the land above all else. So it wasn't clearly hinted in the Skypiea arc that the sun god was actually supposed to be the most important, though symbolism of the sun was present in that arc at its climax. It's hard to actually say how much the Shandians put the sun god on a pedestal, or whether they even know the name Nika today, as the Shandians may have also gone through many cultural shifts during the White Sea Wars that took place after Kalgara's time. But this does bring us to two very important races, the Buccaneers and the Lunarians. From the trends we can see so far, the only way to maintain a culture around the legend of the sun god is by managing to exist completely outside of the world government's influence. That's why it makes so much sense that the very first race that we see that very explicitly passes down the exact legend of Nika, word for word, of a dancing warrior of liberation from generation to generation, is the Buccaneers, and what do you know, that's also a race that the world government has eliminated. The Buccaneers have been culled over the centuries. Kuma is literally the last living member of their kind. That's why it makes so much sense that we traveled so far in the One Piece world without mentions of Nika. The idea is that it's a legend that stands against the ruling powers of the world, and so the world government has already been doing all it can to stamp it out. The Lunarians very possibly also knew of the legend of Nika, and what do you know? They're an extinct race as well. The whole point is that the world that we see today exists in the wake of mass erasure, so of course the legend of Nika is not something that is going to be commonly known. Any race that still explicitly holds on to that legend is a direct enemy of the world government and is likely to be exterminated over time. And any races that are able to stay out of the world government's influence are only able to exist in their own little isolated bubbles where the details of the legend likely fade over time. So what we have now is a varied tapestry of cultures carrying the memory of Nika in different ways. Some are under the world government's thumb and are only able to retain the message but not the story. Some know of the coming prophecy that will come with the dawn. Some believe in the sun god. And finally, the last few who seem to know the exact story of Nika himself, who he is, the dancing warrior of liberation, while these are nearly gone from the world. But at the same time, that's what makes the story of Kuma so powerful. The final Buccaneer, the final one carrying the true story of Nika, he is the one who could bring it into reality with his final actions. And soon the whole world will remember again. I believe that is the climax that we are heading towards. One wherein the whole world is united in renewed faith in the savior, the sun god Nika, who will bring the dawn to all races and cultures. So let me know how you think the world government managed to erase the story of Nika from the public in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, then definitely like and subscribe. And you can get my thoughts on how the story of Nika was erased, as well as the significance of the moon in various One Piece races on my weekly podcast by becoming a patron. Just hit the link in the description below. And remember to get up to 3 additional months of Surfshark VPN for free by using my promo code MORGE. Just hit the link in the description below.